So I'm working with Visual Studio and I'm making a C#, an example of creating classes and a little bit of inheritance. So here's what I did. I went into Visual Studio 2015, created a new project, and the project was C# and it's a console application. I made sure I knew where the project was being saved at, and when it built, it came up with, and I gave it the name example of classes. Okay. The only class that originally came with this was the class program by default, and it had one method, which was the static void main method. So I added the rest of this. And what I did is I first went in and I added a class called shape. Now, you notice I put this class called shape outside of my other classes. Here's my class called program, and here's my class called shape. Here's the beginning of it, code block, curly brace, ending curly brace. That's my entire class. And what I did is I created two variables, one called width, one called height. I created a constructor, and I saved a little bit of room on here by putting this all on the same line. I could have made it look like this, but white space doesn't really matter to the compiler. Okay, and then I created a method, and it's a method. It's got a parentheses after the name. It's public, which means that other classes can have access to it. It's void, it doesn't return a value. And then any name that I want to give it, in this case set width, is pretty appropriate because what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a value to this variable called width. So I pass in the variable called W. It's an integer data type. And I assign that value to the variable called width. I do the same thing with height. There's a method called getWidth, and there's a method called getHeight. And all it does is return the value of the width and the value of the height. Okay. I made a third class in here, and I called it class rectangle. Now what I did, see this colon here? What I did is that it inherits shape. In other words, it has access to everything in shape with the keyword public. Now, there's also another public access, there's another access modifier called protected, which I could have used. But in this case, I'm just going with public and private. Now you notice this one will not have direct access to anything marked as private. Okay, but it does have access to all of these public methods here in the shape class. Okay, and again, the shape constructor right now, it's I put this in there but by default it's going to be in there anyway. It won't show up if I don't create it, but by default the compiler sees it and uses it. This is the entry point for this class. This is the starting point. So a lot of times what you'll do is that you'll set the value of variables here. In this case, it's not doing anything. Okay. So that's the shape class, and outside of the shape class, here's the end of the shape class. Here's the beginning of the rectangle class, and again I inherited from shape, so I have access to get width, I have access to get height, I have access to set the height and set the width. So I have access to all of those because they're public. And okay, so down here in my class program, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually test these. And what I do is that from the shape class, I make an object called S1, shape1. New blocks out a place in the computer's memory to make this, and this calls the constructor. So it goes to this constructor right here. Since we're not doing anything in this constructor, you notice it's empty, there's nothing in there. It's not going to do anything different, but this is the way that you call that. Okay, so that's why I did that. So it made a object called S1. Now, with S1, S1 is like a copy of the class. It now has access to everything that's public in that class called shape. So let's try that out. Where have I got that? S1, we're setting the height, and we're setting the width. Setting the height at 11, the width at 10. I'm going to run these out for now. And let's look at this statement. I'm saying show the height. 0 is the very first character here, and width is the next character here. And what I will be doing is pulling up the value of the height and the width. So that will display information from the shape class. Now, what I did is I created this rectangle class and an inherited shape. So here's what I did. I have a rectangle class, create an object out of this. Again, I'm in my main method here. And calls the constructor, blocks out location in the computer's memory. And for this object, which I'm calling R1, here's what I'm doing. I'm calling a method called set width and height. If I go up here, I've got a method in this rectangle class called width and height. You notice that it has access to set height and set width methods that are in the shape class, so I have access directly to those. And then it has access to the get width and get height methods that are in the shape class. So it can directly access those. Okay. Okay, so it sets the width and height, width at 3, the height at 5. When you multiply those two together, you get the area. So in this statement, I should be getting the area from this object. There's a method called getArea. If you look up here, getting the width and the height. So it's just multiplying those two. So it should be 15. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Debug. Start debugging. And here's the output from that. Okay, so this is just a quick example of creating more than one class inside of a namespace and a little bit of what inheritance can do. Okay, that'll do it.